Well, I mean, the trigger for my beginning an investigation of the Buenos Aires bombing, the AMIA bombing of 1994, was in fact the indictment that was handed down in 2006 in Argentina. And I began to read much more about it. I'd read something about it before that. And very quickly began to see things that just didn't seem right. And so that I finally decided after a few weeks that I would seek a grant to actually spend some months focusing, doing a very highly focused investigation of the whole affair. And as for the record of Iran in the past, I think one has to differentiate. Yes, the Iranians did two things. One, they did clearly seek out opponents of the regime in Europe and carry out assassinations. No question about that. And in Lebanon, the Iranians were undoubtedly behind the bombing of the Marine barracks in 1983, and presumably the U.S. Embassy as well in 1984. So they did have involvement in what was a very intense, violent, covert war on both sides. Well, of course, this is a primary piece of evidence showing that this case constructed by the Argentine judiciary was really a fraud from the very beginning, from the first moment. They were really, the Argentine government and judiciary was using this as a political tool. Tel Adin was a patsy, essentially. He was a Shia, had a Shia last name. He was a convenient person to involve in the case for that reason, and he was a used car dealer, somebody who had a shady background of dealing with both criminals and the police, chop shop operator. He sold the car that they claimed was used as the suicide bomb vehicle. A point which is very highly questionable, by the way, and I think it's worth pointing out that there are no real eyewitnesses who can credibly claim that they saw the car, the white traffic, Renault Traffic, that is said to have been officially the suicide bomb car. Only one person claimed it, and that testimony was contradicted by her sisters, who were next to her when she claimed to have seen the white car, and therefore, you know, that's a very highly questionable, dubious part of this official case. But Tel Adin was brought into the case by choosing this car and then saying that he was the one who sold it. And of course, somebody doesn't consciously, sell a car to a terrorist knowing that it's going to come back to them. I mean, that's a ridiculous idea in the first place. So what happened was that once they had him in custody, they then used that as leverage to try to get him to cooperate in the case that they were trying to construct. The first thing that happened was that they tried to get him to say that, yes, it was four people who had been arrested in Paraguay, as I recall, who were said to have been Hezbollah sympathizers or members, that they were the ones who were involved in buying the car. And he said, no, that's not the case. He refused to go along with that. The next thing that happened was that they actually offered him money, as you've mentioned, $400,000, to name a couple of high-ranking police officers, Buenos Aires police officers, as the people who were behind the sale or the purchase of the car. And of course, he did say yes to that, and that's why those police officers were later indicted. So, I mean, this was, as I say, a crooked, fraudulent case built by the police, by the intelligence officials, and by the Menem government for their own political purposes. Now I think we come to the crux of this issue. I mean, if there's a single fact that discredits the entire story, the official account of what happened, that is that Iran and Hezbollah somehow combined to carry out this terror bombing in Buenos Aires, it is that the whole case is built around the testimony of someone who's at least goes by the name of Abu Qasim Mesbahi. It's doubtful that that's his real name. He claims to have been in the intelligence service of Iran. But even U.S. CIA people and FBI people say that he never worked for Iranian intelligence after 1988. He had been away from Iranian intelligence for many years by the time this happened, several years by the time this happened, had lost his contacts and wasn't in a position to know what really was going on. But more to the point, and this is something that I did not learn until later, he was the one who later on, after 9/11, claimed that he had been tipped off by his friends in Iranian intelligence that 9/11 was in fact an Iranian operation, and that he had been given coded messages before 9/11, weeks before, that indicated that this had to do with an operational or a plan that they had made, which they then decided to put into operation. The problem, of course, is that he never informed American authorities before 9/11. He only talked about this afterwards. So, I mean, the whole story clearly is a fabrication. And indeed, the FBI agent, the head of the Hezbollah office of FBI, James Bernzani, who I interviewed for my investigation, who went down to Buenos Aires in late 2006 and stayed for several weeks, several months, I should say, into 2007 to help the investigation of the Argentinians on this case, told me that Mesbahi was not considered to have any credibility by U.S. intelligence for that reason. So not because he didn't mention specifically the 9/11 caper, but he said that he was considered to lack any credibility because he did not have intelligence contacts, and he was very poor and was basically ready to sell his testimony for whatever court or government was interested in something that he could blame on the Iran. Well, the phone records are circumstantial in the sense that the case that was being made was a very complicated set of relationships, of links. What they call phone link analysis was what was being used. And so they would link a phone call that they claimed was associated with Rabbani, the Iranian cultural attaché in the embassy in Buenos Aires, that there was a phone call made from that phone to a town in the tri-border area, which was alleged to be the center of the Hezbollah plot. And that, of course, is another matter which we can talk about, the idea that there was, in fact, a terrorist, or there were terrorist cells in the tri-border area that were somehow linked to this plot. But in any case, then there were other links made between the phone numbers in the tri-border area to other phone numbers, and the whole thing was simply a set of complicated links. And again, the FBI head of Hezbollah office, who I interviewed about this, told me that this was simply not a credible approach to trying to show that the Hezbollah or Iran was involved in this bombing. He said you could use the same kind of link analysis to link my telephone with bin Laden's telephone. It is that spurious in terms of its validity.
But there was video of him purchasing the van? Or?
No, it was not a purchase. No, he was in the showroom and looking at white traffics, or looking at cars, and this is one of the cars he looked at.
I see.
That's all that this shows. It doesn't show that he was involved in the purchase of such a vehicle at all.
I mean, if not Iran, then who?
Well, I think there's an obvious suspect here, or a set of suspects, who were never investigated, and I think there's a very understandable reason why they were never investigated, and that is the Argentine police, intelligence, and military figures who were openly anti-Semitic, who were part of the dirty war during the period of the dictatorship, the Argentine dictatorship in the 1980s, a dirty war in which Jews were mistreated, abused, in some cases tortured, much more than non-Jews in the alleged movement of the opposition to the dictatorship because of the anti-Semitism that was so deeply embedded in the security services of the Argentine government at that point. These were people who faced potential charges of war crimes. They were still free. They were still walking the streets. They still had access to the expertise to carry out bombings. Many of them had done that during the Dirty War. This was a period when there were synagogues being bombed. They were in a position to. They were pretty sure that they would not be caught because their friends were still in the security services and the police and the intelligence agency. There was every reason to believe that they were behind this. And indeed, the head of the political section of the U.S. Embassy, Bill Brenchick, told me that he suspected that that was a possibility. And he was a bit surprised that there was never any investigation based on that premise.